a loaded East region, to say the least. This game taking place in Omaha, Nebraska. Third-seeded Illinois, around a 12.5-point favorite as we're recording this, against number 14 seed Morehead State. So I'm going to dive into this one first, just to get it out of the way here, because when we think about spreads being, and this is something I like to talk and discuss a lot over, especially on first round March Madness games or first round point spreads. Spreads aren't what they used to be over, last 5-10 years. The opener, I think, for this game, though, was actually the true spread of inflation in the direction of Illinois' direction that we may have even seen 5 or 10 years ago. So long story short, I think this line was not deflated in Morehead State's direction, where we may see the market trend towards the dog, just because Illinois is coming off that Big Ten tournament championship win over Wisconsin, and the market is seemingly so high on the Illini right now. And I know after the point spread got released, it dipped from Morehead State getting 13.5 down to 12.5 at some shops. But my number actually has this closer to Illinois minus 11.5. I think, Eric, you have this one over at Haslametrics, Illinois minus 12. And keep in mind, Morehead State coming off of that win over Little Rock in the OVC Conference Tournament Championship game. Illinois is elite offensively, undoubtedly. Terrence Shannon with 101 points in the Big Ten tournament, the second most by a player in Big Ten tournament history. But since the beginning of February, Illinois ranks number 161 nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency. They're giving up the 14th highest three-point attempt rate in college basketball, that per your site Haslametrics, overall, not just since the beginning of February. And here comes Morehead State, a team that could give Illinois a lot of issues. Riley Minix, Ohio Valley Conference Player of the Year. And this Morehead State team overall, ranking 25th in three-point attempt rate per Haslametrics. They shoot it at a 35.3% clip from behind the arc. The other thing I really like about the Eagles in this matchup, just because Illinois wants to push the tempo, and you think about a team trying to combat that, especially as an underdog and shorten the possessions, Morehead State ranks number 335 in adjusted pace. So that's a pretty good combination if you're trying to limit Illinois in a large possession game, trying to create a lot of variance. To my point about this spread being inflated, at least more so on the opener than it is right now. And then last point I have in this game, guys, Morehead State's biggest liability is turnovers. I think they rank bottom 100-ish in turnover percentage. Illinois, this isn't your prototypical, at least like Brad Underwood team from when he was coaching Oklahoma State and maybe the first couple seasons with Illinois. They don't pressure the ball. They don't try to generate a lot of turnovers. So I really like Morehead State even catching 12.5 in this first round game, maybe even an upset. Eric, since I mentioned some of your metrics off the bat, what say you here?
Well, I agree with a lot of your stuff. On top of that, you left out the second chance conversion percentage. Morehead State has that advantage on the offensive end. So, I mean, if you're missing your shots, this is not like an Illinois team that is phenomenal at cleaning the glass defensively. There's going to be opportunities here for second chances for Morehead State. But you really hit on the high point as far as like a few different things. Like first of all, you said, like I said, it's about 11.5 what I have over under of 149. Momentum away from home metrics, the intangibles there, they cancel out. But Illinois is susceptible. We've talked about this in the past. The teams that I find the most susceptible going into the tournament are teams that are pretty darn elite offensively, but then are really lax on the defensive end. You think of Iowa the past few years. You think of LSU a few years ago, with Alabama a few years ago, or Ohio State. Perfect example. Ohio State when they lost to Oral Roberts. Same situation. What are we looking at right here on my site? Illinois second in offensive efficiency, 83rd on the defensive end. And you're also talking, and I thought we covered this a little bit last week, about the possibility of if these teams are hitting it hard in their conference tournament, boom, 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 does that have an effect? Does that stick around 3 or 4 days? You're looking at Illinois, who fought hard for 3 straight days, 3 straight games, whereas Morehead State comes into this game rested. They haven't played in more than a week. Are they going to be chomping at the bit on this one? And is there going to be a little bit of a hangover for Illinois? I don't know. A hangover people associate with bad performances, but if you play bang, bang, bang 3 games in 3 days, does that linger and then all of a sudden when we play 3 games in 3 days and you're off for 3 days, are you out of a rhythm, so to speak? Whereas Morehead State has been prepping, they've been rested. Is that going to be an advantage for them? So, oh my God, there's just a million reasons why someone would want to pick Morehead State in this game. And especially if you're seeing a spread that moves in the 12-13 range, the baseline ratings that I have show Illinois by 11.5. And if you believe, you could take, like you said, talking about an upset, there are worse money line bets in the world than this one. Just keep it in mind, I guess.
So, Derek, you look upset over there.
Yeah.
Why don't you vent to us to start off?
I'm not going to place a bet against Illinois. I want to see them make it to the Sweet 16. I've struggled seeing them, get eliminated early in the tournament, but all your points are, valid. Their defensive rating in their last 10 games, they're allowing 115 points per possession in their last 10 games. That ranks in the 6th percentile per CBB analytics. Their second chance points that they're allowing per game in their last 10 games it's 12, which ranks in the 19th percentile. So they're vulnerable giving up second chance points. They're vulnerable on the defensive end. And, you listen to Brad Underwood today at halftime of the Wisconsin game. He just said, we're going to have to lean on Terrence Shannon and Damask, in the second half of this game. He talked about that in the post-game interview, and he was just like, yeah, I told the team we're going to just give it to Damask and Shannon the rest of the game. So that's kind of where they're at. They just lean on the offense. They don't play a lick of defense lately. And you touched on it, Eli, with, these slow teams. Morehead State is 356th in possession length on offense. They play so slow. And if you're going to beat or if you're going to cover a large spread like this against a team like Illinois, you need to grind out the possessions and make them, limit the Illinois' possessions. So yeah, it's a kind of a bad matchup here. And then, Riley Minix, he can space out the court for Morehead State too, and that's a bit of a problem. Illinois struggled with that against Nebraska and rink mast, so overall, it's a tough matchup for Illinois, but I'm not betting against my Illini in the tournament, so I'm just going to sit back and watch. So,
the one last thing I want to say, and Derek, you alluded to it, and I mentioned it off the top, with a slow-paced team trying to cover a big number, just mathematically speaking, is a much higher implied probability than a team trying to ramp up the possessions in a large point spread. And it also correlates to the total as well. But this line, even though the favorite in this game, when I referenced UCLA Akron a couple years ago, UCLA played at a slow tempo, so it isn't necessarily the same thing, but this line reminds me a lot of that number, just because Akron, double-digit dog, shoot a lot of threes, play at a slow pace, can space out the opponent. It kind of has a lot of identical variables if right. Morehead State is hitting threes, but I think Eric hit the nail on the head. You had a week and a half, almost 2 weeks to prep for this game, and Illinois is coming off of 3 grinders, arguably should have lost to Ohio State in the quarterfinals. Mine and Derek's Ohio State Big Ten tournament futures going up in flames because the refs kind of handed that one to Illinois down the stretch. I'm just saying. So, Eric, any quick thoughts you want to wrap up here for our hatred of Illinois basketball?
I would just say that it would not be the worst thing in the world for Morehead State to put a little bit of a scare in Illinois, and it might be the healthiest thing. I've seen this, I think, back, 30 years where it happened to Maryland, where they won a shot at the buzzer and ended up winning the national championship that year. Sometimes I think these early round scares are the best thing for the opposition. And when I look long-term with this bracket, I actually do have Illinois going quite some distance for one reason. Their second round opponent, I'm not enamored with either one of them. It's BYU and Duquesne. And I'm like, BYU has been a little bit overhyped throughout the year. Obviously, they've delivered somewhat in the Big 12, but they bolstered their numbers so much by blowing up cupcakes early on in the season. And then you have Duquesne. I still think Duquesne could pull that upset in that game, but I can't really put a lot of stock in either team going to the Sweet 16. So I kind of have to throw all my eggs in the Illinois basket, so to speak. So I think in this situation here, Morehead State might be the team that kind of rattles Illinois' cage a little bit, but I don't think that's the most unhealthy thing for a team who wants to go the distance. I don't know if Illinois is Final Four worthy, but I think they're Elite Eight worthy. Remains to be seen.
Well, my initial bracket has Morehead State getting to the Sweet 16. So,
nice.
Oh my goodness.
Respect. I like that.
All right, guys, let's head over before Derek decides to exit the podcast and anybody listening from Illinois does the same thing.